So last night, the DOGE team, run by President Donald Trump's top campaign donor, staged a hostile physical takeover of an independent nonprofit called the U.S. Institute of Peace. The U.S. Institute of Peace is not a government agency. Theirs is not a government building. They told the DOGE staffers they could not come in, that they had no authority over them. DOGE staff then physically forced their way in with the help of the FBI and the D.C. police. Congressman Don Beyer of Virginia heard what was happening and went there along with his wife. He later wrote online, quote, "I was at the U.S. Institute of Peace tonight to conduct congressional oversight over DOGE's break-in. USIP is an independent nonprofit entity, and I will work to stop DOGE's illegal power grab." Joining us now is Congressman Don Beyer of Virginia. Congressman, I really appreciate you being here to talk about this tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel, very much. It was very concerning. And you laid out the case very well.
What did you see last night when you went?
When we got there, the D.C. police had already escorted all the staff out. The last person out was the president of the USIP, George Moose, a longtime U.S. ambassador. And he had locked himself in his office to protest the illegal firing of 11 of the USIP board members by Donald Trump. And the D.C. police actually picked the lock on his office to get him and take him to the outside. The real challenge is that there's something in the law, the congressional charter for USIP, that says a president can replace a board member with board consultation for committing a felony or some gross malfeasance. He didn't consult any board members, and certainly there were no felonies.
What do you make of the use of all these various law enforcement agencies as part of these takeovers? We saw this with the U.S. Africa Development Foundation. We saw it with some of the very early stuff that DOGE did, and we didn't know who they were saying they were going to call on to force their way in. But now it seems like they're invoking the U.S. Marshals, the FBI, and now the D.C. police as effectively their muscle, as their armed phalanx that will physically force them into places that they may not be legally allowed.
It's very concerning. It's like, where does DOGE get any legitimacy, any right to invade an independent nonprofit 501c3? Rachel, there are 232,000 501c3 nonprofits in the United States. By this measure, Donald Trump could send the police or the marshals into any one of them and demand to see their books, throw out their people, replace their board members. It's really unprecedented. The poor DC police took their orders initially from the acting U.S. attorney, this guy, Ed Martin, who's just a MAGA hatchet man with a lot of personal vendettas. And when they were also called by George Moose and the USIP leadership, they didn't know who to trust. And I guess they looked to the FBI, who said, well, you know, Trump fired the board members, therefore you got to stick with him. Although that was clearly illegal.
The takeover and the shutdown of these agencies is being litigated in all sorts of ways in all sorts of places. I imagine it will be by USIP and U.S. Africa Development Foundation. That one's already in court, and all of these other agencies. But this issue of what law enforcement is doing, turning up with guns and saying, we're taking you out of here physically, we're picking the lock, we're getting you out, and we're doing it on behalf of DOGE, that seems like an area for potential litigation. It also seems like an area for law enforcement oversight, congressional oversight, including of the D.C. police, the FBI, the Marshal Service, and anybody else who they're using in this capacity. Do you see any appetite for that among your colleagues on Capitol Hill?
Oh, very much so. I think our busiest committee on Capitol Hill will be the Oversight Committee, led by my colleague Jerry Connolly, and Jamie Raskin, AOC, others will be deeply involved in it. Because we don't have a lot of tools. We're in a minority, but we have to use every tool that we have. And the oversight, the ability to investigate, and then get the word out to the American people is really, really important.
Yeah. And if somebody's calling the cops in D.C. for what is effectively a burglary or an armed assault, they should expect that the cops respond to it, not on behalf of one political faction or another, but on behalf of potential victim of crime.
Yeah, I very much hope that in any other place than Washington, D.C., I'm hoping that the police will be much more independent. In D.C., they're going to look first to the U.S. attorney, sadly, and that's the wrong person in this case.
Congressman Don Beyer, Democrat of Virginia. Sir, thank you very much for your time tonight, and thank you for going there last night. Having your eyes on it is a really important part of this. Thank you.
I just wish I'd been able to make a difference.
Yeah. Well, you might yet. We'll be right back, sir.